The Yaffee Program on WVNN.
Well, good morning, everyone. April Marie here, filling in for Yaffee. I appreciate the listen. You can find me on X at APRYLMARIE. I don't have access to the text line, so if you want to reach me, you got to reach me there. Excited to bring the next guest on. Man, she has done so much for the state of Alabama, for families and residents. It's incredible. It is Katherine Robertson. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. So great to be with you. Love that you're filling in today.
Yes, I'm having fun over here. Well, yesterday, so I have a very odd, I don't even know what to call it. So I would say fascination. It's a hobby. I'm not sure, but I'm obsessed with SCOTUS blog. For whatever reason, I've love watching the Supreme Court. And yesterday we got a decision out of the Supreme Court that was just a tremendous win for families, for sanity. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that because we have seen a lot, especially coming out of Alabama, a lot of SCOTUS decisions and decisions in our states that protect youth from radical trans ideology.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was a really interesting win. It was not, in my mind, it wasn't really a difficult decision for them to reach, but it is pretty amazing that it was an 8-1 decision, which means only one of the liberal justices, and you can guess which one, took the opposite approach. All the rest of them were all on the same page that a state cannot prohibit a Christian counselor from counseling people the way that, he or she feels is best. And Colorado has a history now over the last decade or so of being really discriminatory, specifically against the Christian point of view. And so this was a big win and nice to have just like a very decisive win in this space.
Well, you're an active member, and I've seen you represent Alabama at some of the Republican Attorney General's events. Alabama has really led the way on protecting religious freedoms, on protecting parental rights. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've done and what the office has done here in Alabama?
Yeah, I think every attorney general is going to kind of have their issues that they're always going to want to be out in front on. And in some ways, this trans issue, came to us. Alabama was one of the first states to pass the VCAP law, as you're very familiar with, which bans the practice of transgender medicine from being practiced on children. And we were one of the first states to pass that law, and then one of the first states to fight a challenge. And so that continued to open the door for Alabama to really have a national lead on that issue, coupled with First Amendment issues that go along with that. I think a lot of people don't realize that the trans agenda is also a very huge problem for free speech, whether that's for teachers, for counselors, for people in the workplace. If there are laws demanding that you recognize and defer to someone's gender identity, then that impacts your ability to speak the way you want to speak. And so one of the big issues we litigated in Title IX was try to protect our teachers and principals and school administrators from having to kowtow to, the ever-changing whims of, teenagers that may come in one day and say they're a boy and the next and say they're a girl. So lots of First Amendment issues and religious liberty issues tied up with fighting this agenda at large.
Yeah. Well, I just truly appreciate what you guys have done. This is one of those fights where I remember when it happened, people were like, is this really an issue? And then we found out this was a big issue in Alabama, and it's specifically in Birmingham through the UAB was really, I put in air quotes, treating these kids, and it was frightening. Well, I want to transition a little bit. You have an article in the Washington Post, and it really brings attention to something we most of us don't think about. It's as I said earlier to our listeners, my full-time beat is the education beat here in Alabama now. And so I'm becoming more and more aware of these things that are impacting our schools and our teachers. You talk about one, which is the desegregation orders that are impacting the state. Tell our listeners who may not know, even here in Huntsville, about them, what's going on here.
Yeah, so, we've been having this big conversation about race and when government can or cannot, view citizens through the lens of race. And that's been a very hot topic. You have the Harvard admissions decision where the United States Supreme Court said, the time for that kind of racial preference has passed. That was to right a historical wrong that has long been corrected, and to continue that practice of viewing university applicants through the lens of race is unconstitutional. Then we, went into this debate about redistricting and whether our citizens should be grouped together or drawn together in congressional districts, prioritizing race above all else. And then, of course, you've had the Trump administration through various executive orders really try to get rid of this poison of DEI, that was just forced out during the Biden administration. And so, but there's another angle here that we've seen a little action from the Trump Civil Rights Division out of DOJ, and that is these desegregation orders. So very similar to redistricting, states like Alabama and many deep South states have public school systems that are under federal court orders that were put in place in the 60s and 70s, demanding that the government not stand in the way of integration in public schools. And you could argue that was a needed tool back then, but to argue that same thing in 2026 is insane. And it's very similar to the insanity of redistricting. And so I wrote a piece for the Washington Post this week, which I couldn't believe that they published. But I just sort of argue that while we're having this conversation about university admissions, while we're having this conversation about congressional maps, we've got to be talking about these desegregation orders. We think that there are roughly 40 school systems in Alabama that still exist under these. And what it means is that on an annual basis, the school system has to certify, the racial diversity of their teachers, the racial diversity of their students, all the way down to school discipline and gifted programs. And I just think it's a shame. It is a costly thing. You have to have lawyers working on it, incessantly, year after year after year. The federal judges who put these orders in place died a long time ago, and so it's just time to see these lifted. And I'd like to see our state negotiate with the Trump administration to get these things lifted across our state and let our schools operate freely without, this burden hanging over them. And I think especially because of the progress we've made on school choice, there's just no argument that these are still needed. People have so many more opportunities than they've ever had before.
Yeah. Would this be something that is administered by both the Department of Education and Department of Justice? What in the Trump administration, who would be the key to unlocking this and ending this madness?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was the United States Justice Department that sued these states and sued these school systems years and years and years ago. And so that's why the settlement negotiations would really be with DOJ. The tricky part, as I pointed out in my op-ed, is that the Attorney General's office does not specifically have the authority to represent local school systems. That's part of the reason they're spending so much money on legal bills. And so my idea is that these school systems, let us represent them in negotiations and see if we can't come up with a global resolution for all the school systems in our state, rather than trying to tackle them one by one, where they're footing the bill. AG representation is free if you'll let us represent you. And so it's just something I've kind of had in the back of my mind for a long time, but you have to wait for the right moment and the right DOJ. And I think that moment is upon us.
That's awesome. Okay, so you've been with the Attorney General's office now for how many years?
10 years.
10 years. I still have you in my phone as with Alabama Policy Institute, which cracks me up every time I go to call you.
I'll still claim them.
And you are obviously now running for Attorney General. How is that race going? And what are you centering that campaign on?
Yeah, the race is going well. We're something like 47 days out from the May 19th primary. My story is a little different than a lot of people that choose to run for office. I've never wanted to, never had the ambition, and really never planned to. But what I'm running is just on the invaluable experience of being in that office for 10 years, being the right-hand man to the Attorney General, and learning that office in a way that you just can't. Looking from the outside in, the decisions that have come across the AG's desk over the last 10 years are some of the wildest things I think that office could ever deal with, whether that's the opioid epidemic, the Biden administration, a pandemic, nationwide vaccine mandates. That kind of battle testedness, I think, is what sets me apart. And so I have worked doggedly to go all over the state of Alabama to share my story and my experience and what my vision is for the office. And I just think that if you have an opportunity to elect an attorney general who has a jump start, that doesn't need any on-the-job training, that can be ready on day one to pick up some of these very important fights, to help a brand new governor and a brand new slate of constitutional officers, and then to make the most of the last few years of the Trump administration without needing time to get revved up and learn the job and learn the office. That's what I'm offering. And so I'm also, I believe, the law enforcement candidate in this race, and I think I'm the most proven conservative candidate in this race. So I'm out sharing my story with Alabamians, and I feel like it's resonating.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I feel like every couple of days I get an email saying that another sheriff or law enforcement officer has endorsed you. Do you know approximately how many you have of the sheriffs around the state? Because it seems like it's pretty consistent, pretty constant.
Yeah, I've been so honored by that, and I think that's just a testament to, the work that I've done over the years. I've been a behind the scenes person, and that's not always what you need to launch a political campaign. You need to have been out in front, and I really haven't been. But the sheriffs have been super loyal to me. I think I have 26 endorsements at this point, which is the majority of the Republican sheriffs, and several prominent police chiefs as well. But I think they're the kind of people that were in there. They're in the foxhole with you. They see what goes on behind the scenes, and some of those endorsements just have really meant a lot to me. I'm a first-time candidate. It's a risk to associate with somebody who's never run for office before, and the fact that so many of them are willing to stand with me has really touched me, and I think has gotten the attention of their constituents.
I think that's amazing. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to give us a call today. I'll repost that story that you wrote just so our listeners can read that themselves. So if you guys want to see it. Now, where can our listeners find you online?
Yeah. If you like hot takes on policy issues, I would suggest my X account. It's KGRob27. If you want to see what I'm out doing on the campaign trail, I would check out Instagram at Katherine for AG or Facebook, Katherine Robertson for Attorney General. My commitment to you is I try not to be boring. So check us out.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we hope you have a great day, Katherine. I appreciate the call.
Thank you. Great talking with you.
All right. That was Katherine Robertson from the Attorney General's office. It's so crazy. I have the Attorney General's office here in Alabama has done just tremendous work, and I was slow. I didn't know Steve Marshall when he was first elected, and I don't want to say I was critical, but I was a little critical of him. I was like, she's signing on to a lot of letters, a lot of support, and then I realized that the coalition that has been built with Republican AGs across the country, those relationships, the relationships that now translate over to DOJ, they have been tremendous for the success of things here in Alabama. And whereas I hope and pray on a regular basis, I always say, look at what other states are doing, other governors leading the way. Here in Alabama, we've had an attorney general who's been doing that. So pretty cool. And that's an important race. All right. I've talked myself right over a break. I'm going to get myself in trouble with Yaffee here. You guys hold tight, take a break and come back and we'll talk about these issues and more.
It's the Yaffee Program on WVNN.
Hey, football fans, it's Cam Hayward from the Pittsburgh Steelers. I still remember what draft night felt like for me. The nerves, the waiting, and then hearing my name called knowing everything was about to change. The 2026 NFL Draft presented by Bud Light is coming to Pittsburgh, April 23rd to the 25th. Enjoy 3 days of football, family fun, and the moment draft dreams come true. Register for free entry at NFL.com/draft access. Maybe I'll see you there.
Full Send Golf.
You guys know how much I really, really love golf, and I think every week would be dope to post on the Golf Channel. I want to get a lot of guests on here.
Salim's going to take lead. I'm down to be in it. It's not really work to play golf.
Join the party on the golf course.
I was like, let's go to the range. Oh. So what are we putting on it?
We said 10K, right?
10K? All right.
We probably bet more than all the other golf channels, right?
10K, 9 holes.
Those guys bet for like cookies.
I feel like I'm going to shank it.
This guy's been training like a Navy SEAL when it comes to golf.
I'm very, very excited. You excited?
Yeah.
Full Send Golf. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Vince Colonnese is redefining news talk with The Vince Show.
It is a reflection of your response to this program that we get to take this thing to the next level. These gigantic shows. This is going to be so much fun. It's unbelievable.
In-depth interviews, live caller interactions, and a front row seat to the most important conversations of the day.
I've got updates. I've got big stories. We'll sort through the truth of what's really going on. So buckle up. Here it comes.
The Vince Show. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.